And speaking of conservative values and common sense, it's time to hear from Editor-in-Chief of the Spectator Australia, Rowan Dean. Rowan, how are you, mate?
I'm great, Gideon. You're doing a terrific job here with Spectator Australia TV. I'm getting lots of great compliments, so well done, mate.
Oh, thank you so much, mate. Well, look, we do it for freedom and we do it for the message. Now, speaking of the message, you had a fantastic editorial on Outsiders over the weekend, which was published on spectator.com.au as a transcript this week. We've already spoken to Rebecca Weisser a little bit about the encroachment of wokeness into the workplace, but tell me what your take is.
Well, I was appalled to see the Liberals going down this path. Let's not forget, Gideon, that the entire 55 recommendations are built around work done in cahoots with a mob called Our Watch. Now, Our Watch, whatever you may make of them, whatever their motives, doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they are a pretty hardcore feminist activist group and have copped quite a bit of criticism for some of their approaches. Now, when a Liberal government hands over the reins basically to a left-wing activist group, I just shake my head in disbelief. As I said on Outsiders, why not just hand energy policy over to Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion, and why not hand industrial relations over to Get Up, which we appear to have done. Exactly, that's what Matt Keane is busy doing. So from a philosophical or political point of view, Gideon, I was horrified by this approach. Now, you always have to qualify this. Absolutely, without any question, any kind of sexual harassment in the workplace is abhorrent, is to be deplored, and where crimes occur, obviously the police need to be involved. But the idea, so put that to one side, what we're talking about, and that though, let's not forget, Gideon, no matter how much activists tell you Australia is not in the middle, and Australian businesses and small businesses and workplaces are not in the middle of some horrific kind of sexual abuse crisis. Yes, there are instances, and look at the statistics and look at the police follow-ups and draw your own conclusions. But this idea that every workplace in Australia, which let's not forget is for many people their entire life, this is their social life, this is their career, this is everything that they live for many, many people. Now being accused of being a rampant hotbed of sexual abuse and sexual harassment, where every woman should be terrified, hiding behind the water cooler in case some priapic man leaps out and assaults them, is just so wrong on so many levels. Yet that is the underlying philosophy of these 55 recommendations. And sure, that might be exaggeration, but that is the mindset. And this is what we are telling young people going into the workforce. We are telling young women, be careful out there. You know, it's like the old Hills Blue. What was it? The Hill Street Blues. Be careful out there. So this idea that you're immediately threatened if you're a woman in the workplace, and the flip side, which is equally concerning, telling young men, you are so terrible. You are so dreadful. You really need to be pulled in line for your behavior in the workplace because we don't trust you one inch. That's the underlying messages of this approach, rather than leaving it to the workplace, to the individuals, to the CEOs, to the HR managers, to the colleagues, to the people who have built these businesses and to employ people, rather than leaving it to them to do the right thing, to make sure that any kind of misunderstandings are dealt with. We've got the full force of Fair Work Australia marching in with their I was going to say jackboots, that's probably unfair, but they're metaphorical jackboots, able to march into any workplace and say, sorry, that person, that man there is out of a job. They're gone. They have no comeback. They have no legal avenue to prove themselves innocent. We've had the accusation. We believe the accuser. Therefore, your career is finished. Is just horrific, Gideon.
It is. And look, I touched on this a bit with Rebecca, but it bears going into because this is my bugbear from the horror days when I worked in a big professional services organisation myself. The HRisation of the workplace, the effect that it's had that means we can't tell jokes in the workplace anymore. We can't go out for drinks at the pub after work in many workplaces because that's too much of a minefield in an HR sense. The same people who are micromanaging our behaviour in the workplace, which, as you said, is where we spend the majority of our lives a lot of the time, the micromanagement there, the same people who go on about that are also talking about the fact that there is a loneliness crisis, there's a mental health epidemic. I mean, none of this is making us happier. What's with the disconnect there?
Well, it's worse than that, because we've seen time and time again in all sorts of spheres, if you set up these government outfits or any kind of managerial situation where people have to manage a kind of problem, they end up creating more of that problem for themselves. So in order to stay in work, basically. So if you tell the HR person in a company with, say, 200 people, I used to be 2IC to a company with 200 people, we had an HR girl there. If you tell the HR person, there's rampant sexual misbehavior out there, go and seek it out. And if she sits back for 6 months and can't see anything, she's going to be out of a job. So she's going to latch on to every complaint that comes up. And rather than, quietly, maybe things can be a misunderstanding. This is what really bugs me, Gideon, is that a Liberal Party, you expect this from Labor, you expect this from the Greens, but you do not expect this from a so-called Liberal Party, which prides the individual. Now, we know that individuals are very, very different. And what to one person might be, an offensive look or an offensive comment, to someone else is an innocent joke or is a flippant kind of remark. But what we're saying is to individuals, we will crush you. The state will crush you if you do anything that we have, our bureaucrats have set out as this is what the norm is. You do anything that offends that, you're out of work, So the chilling effect, Gideon, upon people in the workplace, this will destroy, as with always with left-wing ideas, you achieve the opposite of what you set out to do. What this will do is make the workplace less equal, less harmonious, less vibrant, a less exciting place to be, because young women will be shunned by older men, more senior colleagues. They'll think, oh, hang on, I dare not be seen with this girl or speaking to her too often or in the same room, etc. So we know we've seen that already occurring. You will have young men, Gideon, who are saying, oh, hang on, I dare not fraternize with that colleague over there because I could be accused of looking the wrong way. She's in competition with me. I don't want to be put in a position where she can say, well, hang on, he did this or he did that or he said this or said that. So you're going to get this chilling effect where you get a Stasi-like suspicion, paranoia, fear, and mistrust will become the norm in these offices. So the complete opposite of what they're setting out to do. As I say, you expect this of the left. For a Liberal government to do this, shame on them. Absolute shame on them.
Yeah, and I know I go on about your novel Corkscrewed a lot, but I've got my girlfriend reading at the moment, and I've reread a few chapters. Now, that is set in the 1980s in London, and the workplace standards there, shall we say, are nothing like the workplace standards that are being enforced on us now. But there's a serious point to all of it. Looking at that novel in that time, it was fun, it was free, it was liberated. And, given the book is about the advertising industry, that it maximizes the creative process. It allows the self-expression that allows us to be our best selves. Surely all of these rules and these external standards being imposed from above, it's counterproductive, isn't it? It's
totally counterproductive if you're looking at a workplace which is vibrant, exciting, as you mentioned, creative, innovative, all those things. If you're looking at now, again, I repeat, I'm not advocating any kind of sexual misconduct, and the book was a work of fiction, but it certainly did draw on what had occurred there. Now, that sort of libertarian approach, okay, sure, there's an argument for saying, well, if someone said, if this or that person felt uncomfortable or that these wrong things happen, absolutely. But it's up to the people in the businesses to sort this out. So This is my critical point, Gideon. It is not for Fair Work Australia to be wandering around dismissing people on the basis of accusations of misconduct. And as I said, the reality is ultimately it is the young, talented women who will suffer the worst, because the young, talented women, you will have the less talented women or those who are not quite as smart or as clever or have the same skills, who will have the temptation of being able to get ahead simply by crying waving the sexism or the misogyny flag, and that looks after them. So, but the talented young go-getter woman who wants to be ahead and get ahead, she's now at a disadvantage because she won't be getting the collegiate work from her males or her superiors, and she's now got to compete with this insane ability of others to jump forward waving the sexism card. It's just a mess. It's a minefield, and it's not what a Liberal government should ever be going anywhere near. And the fact that they've done it for purely political reasons is even more sickening.
And a reminder to viewers, if you're interested in reading Rowan's excellent novel Corkscrewed, we are giving it away for free, a signed copy with IPA membership. So keep watching till the end of the show for details on that promotion on how you can get a free copy of this hilarious, entirely fictitious novel. Now, moving on to your editorial in the Spectator Australia this week, Scott Morrison has announced this week in relation to vaccines that Australia is now on a war footing. Now, I remember just over a year ago, Australia was put on a war footing then as well. That's what the PM said. And it turned out he actually did a pretty good job of it. We ended up under martial law for the better part of a year. So what do you make of this latest war footing 2.0 that we've been put on?
Well, I'm sorry, Gideon, but it immediately reminded me of Dad's Army. Now, for those younger viewers who may not remember Dad's Army, it was a classic British comedy sitcom from the 70s about a hopeless bunch of characters. They were too old or too young to actually enlist and go to war, so they were at home, protecting Britain from being invaded by the Nazis, and the comedy revolved around the fact that they were pretty much up against an imaginary enemy most of the time, yet they were always panicked and fearful and running around with all sorts of elaborate scams and schemes to save the nation. And I'm sorry, this just reminded me of Dad's Army. It reminds me particularly the National Cabinet is, I say in my editorial, it's a comedy troupe worthy of Perry and Croft, who wrote Dad's Army. The National Cabinet is a complete farce. It has been a farce from day one, and and we're now told going on to a war footing means these clowns meeting up twice a week now.
Good God.
It's just a joke. The damage they've already done is beyond repair, probably for several decades. And what you have is why I see the comparison so strongly is those sitcoms and things like Dad's Army revolved around these pompous, jumped up little characters who were in love with the power they could suddenly wield, and they used it to the absolute hilt against, Mrs. Kafooks down the road or the innocent post office attendant or whatever. And we're seeing the same thing here, where these jumped up premiers are using powers way beyond what they should have and doing incredible damage. And as I mentioned, it's like they seriously believe that locking down the borders, they're saving the citizens of their state from an army of diseased, infected zombies from New South Wales crossing into Queensland or Victoria. It's laughable stuff. And I'm afraid, Scott Morrison, when they start laughing at you, you're in trouble.
Well, to paraphrase the Dad's Army theme song, who do you think you are fooling, Mr. Morrison? Now, Vale Prince Phillip, very, very sad, a great individual, a great member of the royal family. You've written about the death of Prince Phillip this week in the Spectator Australia online. Now, he may very well be the last non-woke royal and a climate skeptic as well.
Yes, fantastic. Ian Plimer, who writes for the Spectator Australia, sent me a letter that he'd received from Prince Phillip only a couple of years ago after one of Ian Plimer's books was sent to Prince Phillip, and that was his book on the climate delusion, which was a follow-up to his book Heaven and Earth, which was also about climate change. Prince Phillip was a fan of both books and wrote to Ian personally to tell him as much, and that he regarded the windmills dotting the landscape as absolute monstrosities and questioned whether they served any practical purpose whatsoever. Clearly a climate skeptic. And the great tragedy of the story, Gideon, is that back in 2010, after the first book I mentioned, Heaven and Earth, Ian Plimer was invited by Prince Phillip to go to London to deliver a lecture on his climate skepticism that was blocked by the palace on the grounds that the royals should not be in any way involved in the politics of climate change. Yet now, 10 years later, we have Prince Charles pushing the Great Reset, the greatest climate scam known to mankind. and his two sons not much far behind him.
Well, look, I hope for our sakes Prince George or Louis or Charlotte are better, but on the current trajectory, who knows? But we on Spectator Australia TV will continue to protect Prince Philip's legacy. We will continue to keep the anti-woke tradition alive, and not least of all in the Spectator Australia magazine and online as well. So to you, Rowan, thank you so much. Looking forward to chatting next week, mate.
Thanks, Gideon. Take care, mate.